Heartland Farm Partners President Jeff Peterson is our market analyst this week. According to the latest USDA crop progress report, 72% of the nation's corn was in good to excellent condition as of Sunday, July 29th, the same as the previous week. Soybean conditions were rated 70% good to excellent, also the same as the previous week. Meanwhile, soybeans were 86% blooming as of Sunday, 9 percentage points ahead of the average of 77%, and 60% of soybeans were setting pods, 19 percentage points ahead of the 41% average. Corn silking was estimated at 91%, that's 9 percentage points ahead of the 5-year average, and 38% of corn was in the dough stage, 18 percentage points ahead of the average of 20%. This is one area of the report that concerned Jeff when we asked for his analysis.
Jerry, the biggest thing we're concerned about is how fast this crop is moving along, and we probably best see this in the rating that's called the percent dough. And what that is, according to NASS puts those numbers out, and what they do is they're looking at the ear and they're saying when 50% of the kernels on that ear is dented, and actually the kernel itself has a solid solution in it. You know, at that point they're calling that in the dough stage. It was at 38%. That's the fastest for this particular week going back in history. To give you an idea, put that in perspective, that's faster than 2012, 38% for this year. 2012 was 37%. Another year that moved along really fast was 2010, and that was at 31%. But put this in perspective, we actually planted this crop about 2.5 weeks later than either one of those years. So this crop is moving along very fast.
And why is that?
Yeah, and a lot of it's coming back to really our warm temperatures. And so we think about what happened in July, the first part of the month, we actually had some really warm temps, and if we'd walk back even before that, we had a mix of warm and cold, but overall we'd given this crop more growing degree units, so we really moved it along fast. And that's okay in the vegetative state, but once we get to tassel and we start going ahead and transitioning to where we start filling that ear, we'd really like to see this slow down, really fill those ears full to give us our best yield.
So what ultimately is this likely to mean?
I think what it can mean down the road, if we would have a little bit drier conditions as we go into August, if we would have a little bit warmer temperatures as we go into August, it would potentially mean that we could end up with a below trend line yield. Now, I don't think that's the case where we're at today, but that's ultimately at the end of the day what it could mean if these conditions continued and the crop kept progressing at the rate it's at.
Anything else in the report that's of concern?
No, there really isn't. I think everything else really looks okay.
Okay, let's talk about the market and the kinds of things that the market is currently focusing on.
Yeah, we're seeing a growing attention on weather, and we talked a little bit about that, but the real focus then becomes the yield and what's our final yield going to be. And as USDA comes out with different reports, we'll get updates on that. But a lot of the attention at any given moment is the trade side. So whenever you hear something positive about trade or that trade talks are moving along with China, the markets all of a sudden surge higher. And the minute you hear something negative, all of a sudden the market backs off strongly. And that's all back to the trade side. But right now, a lot of the focus is really on the weather and the yields.
And a little bit of information came out today, which was not good, that maybe more tariffs for China?
Yeah, it does look like it. So the tariffs that they planned on putting on, you know, they're talking about raising that. Instead of the 10% they had been talking about on the $200 billion in tariff, the thought is that maybe we end up taking that on up to 25%. So we'll just have to see how that actually turns out.
And what about NAFTA? There seems to be some progress being made there.
It is, and I think anytime we can get something positive from the NAFTA side, that's good. It looks like we're making some progress there. Hopefully, maybe here in August, we'll hear something on the Mexico side, Canadian side, maybe sometime out in September, but those are still some pretty big tentative dates at this point yet.
Okay, let's talk about next week's supply and demand report. That is going to be important.
It really is, and it's a different report as we get into August. It's an exciting time. We're getting closer to harvest, but there is a big difference in how the yield is determined in this report compared to the past reports. So for the 2018 crop, the one that's going to be harvested this fall, the first estimate that would have came out from USDA would have been back in May, and up until this time, or up until the August report, they would have been using models to determine what the yield is. In the August report, they will actually physically start looking at in-field observations, and they'll also do farmer surveys. So they'll survey 20,000 farmers by email or phone starting, and they've already done some of it, starting those last few days of July and the first few days of August because they're trying to come up with where they think the yield is of August 1st. So they'll survey those 20,000 farmers, they'll ask them what's going on in regard to their yields, how do they think the yields will be, and then probably the best part about it though is that then they'll identify 1,900 different plots all across the U.S. in the 10 major corn producing states, and within those fields they'll determine 2 particular plots within that field, and then they'll send enumerators into the field and actually start looking at how do the stalks look. They'll look at the ears, they'll actually peel the ears back and look at them and say, depending on how far along those ears are, they'll either, if they're mature, they'll take them into the lab and weigh them. If they're not so mature, they'll maybe measure them. And if they're not really much, they aren't progressed very far at all, they'll just say, well, we've got an ear so far. So it's a very comprehensive process.
Give us your expert opinion on what are we going to learn from this?
Yeah, what I think we'll see is that currently the trend line yield is at 174, and that's where they have us at. I think we'll see them come in probably 1.5 bushels higher yet. I'm not sure that that's where we'll ultimately see the final yield at, but based on the crop conditions we had, based on how things have been going, I think we'll see them come in somewhere in that 175, 175 and a half area. The biggest change that we've seen actually would have came where they've actually increased the yield in this report as much as 7 bushels, but I don't think we'll see it this year.
So if we're looking down the road, things looking good from your opinion?
Well, things are moving along in regard to the yield. Yes, it is. Things are actually looking pretty good from the price perspective. One of the big challenges that we've got right now, in a lot of cases, is what I should do with this remaining old crop corn bushels.
And what should they do?
Yeah, and if you've got old crop corn around yet, I think on any strength here in the market, if you need to move it by harvest time, you need to go ahead and make some sales. If you have a longer window of time and you could hold on longer, and let's say you had bin space, I think you'll see better prices after we get past harvest. But time is going to tell, and it depends on the weather and the yields whether that's going to be the case.